Is recording. All right. As someone who's enjoyed listening to music since they were young, I've come to find the importance of lyrics within an artist's piece and just how jarring or uplifting they can be. As popular singer Billie Eilish once said, lyrics are so important, but they're really underrated. A statement that still proves to be true within the music industry to this very day. As one of the main pieces of a musical piece, it's interesting that this be the case, but it still holds true. Sometimes I find myself ignoring the lyrics in favor of the instrumental, something that can result in the loss of the reason the piece was written in the first place. This happens with a myriad of artists, in my case, something I found interesting to explore. One of the artists I feel this can best be applied to is a Japanese pop artist / band known as Tuyu. Because of the language barrier, it's much easier for the meaning to be overlooked, especially as a native English speaker. But when you finally understand and grasp the meaning, it makes the piece so much more beautiful and intricate. Their songs talk about the sufferings and intricacies of living, as well as tackling difficult subjects from the perspective of various fictional characters or simply the singer themselves, over an upbeat tempo. Because of the music in the background, attention is oftentimes driven away from the genuine meaning of the piece, even though the lyrics hold just as much strength, if not more, than the instrumental. A case where this is most prominent could be one of Tuyu's most popular songs, "I'm Getting on a Bus to the Other World, See Ya." On the topic of this song, this song is set with an exposition as a person who lives life solely of regret for all the tragedy caused by their hand, in turn resulting in the loss of a will to live because they're simply the bringer of disappointment and pain. The song even goes so far as to say, what value is there to a life that wants to end? For further reference purposes, this is a translation of the Japanese romaji, not the exact words for better understanding. When the character was younger, they were bullied often, but wondered if they stuck up for themselves, that perhaps it wouldn't be like this. The theory of happiness is uselessly deep is a statement used in this verse. I find this to be an interesting statement, as it goes to show just how deep these feelings are and how they've warped this perception of emotions other than negative ones, so much so that they can only view genuine joy as just a theory in the minds of others. Time only passes in life, and decisions can't go undone. So the things that they've done and put up with that brought such feelings, those can never really be reversed. They're set in stone. When they respond to the statements of others, it's with a certain sadness covered up by fury, a reaction that just conveys a feeling of pure exhaustion, because they're just tired of it all. Is there any meaning to life if you want it to end, they ask? Are there any dreams seen in a life that wants to end? There are none. They lack the feeling to long and yearn for something more, at least not in this life. People pretend to understand them with their vague condolences like, that must suck, or, oh, so sorry, but in no way does that comfort the emptiness and sadness that they feel, because they just brush it off. At the end of the day, they say their first and final struggle in vain, something I feel very intriguing. Because this is their final, it communicates this is the final thing they do before dying on their own accord. But in the most interesting part of this word choice is the statement, in vain. It means their whole life they refuse to do anything for themselves, working and living for the comfort and joy of others and never their own happiness. So much so to the point that they don't even know how to make themselves happy anymore. This is the first and final thing they do for their own sake and for their own well-being, something that, so sickly and ironic at the same time, is to die. The dying in this case is what Bus to the Other World, as said in the song title, references. Getting on the bus means giving up their regrets, right? And yet, even though this is what they wanted, what they needed, they still wished, as said in later tracks, that they had not. Would you have been able to derive the meaning from the song even if you were a native Japanese speaker? Perhaps yes, perhaps no, but it still goes to show the importance of lyrics within a musical piece. In just a 3-minute song, an entire story, heart-wrenching story at that, was told. Something that has the ability to resonate with those who have the same mindset. It creates the idea that, no, you're not alone in these feelings, rather than normalizing and encouraging these thoughts, which communicates a message that several could benefit from through the lyrics themselves. The second instance of importance within a misunderstood or ignored lyrics is the case of popular artist Jack Stauber and his Shop, a pop opera album, one I've come to enjoy and appreciate very much. In fact, his music is quite relaxing to listen to, but once learning of the meaning, I actually found myself loving it a lot more. To provide context, Stauber is an artist who doesn't articulate his words in a way you, I'm speaking for myself here, can understand in full, sort of. Because of this, the meaning can get lost within his music. On the topic of his album Shop, a pop opera, it's important to understand the exposition. Within the show, a 15-minute segment of sorts, Jack plays the main character, who is simply trying to cross items off his grocery list, hence the name Shop in the title. Over the course of each song, a new theme is brought up, most of which, if not all, is about what living is like. The first song, Milk, is a story of the life of a milk carton, oddly enough, throughout its life, with the character asking a series of questions as the milk is at its point of curdling. The song uses the milk carton in order to symbolize life as a series of experiences, some of which end up being questioned. The question, what kind of life did you live through? Which I find intriguing because when interpreted as a question one asks themselves, it can result in a series of questions towards yourself. The story of this milk carton can convey the somewhat melancholic tragedy that is living, and as, at the end of the day, there's always the aching question of whether you regret the life you've made for yourself or not. Because, like the song says, the grocery list goes on. The preceding song is called Bread, and is, once looking into the lyrics, rather deeper than anticipated. It tells the story of, from the main character's perspective, a dream of sorts, where he describes everything he has as artisanal. Because of how wonderful the things he owns are, doesn't that mean that he should be happy as well? But he asks himself, where do my clothes end? And can I stop them? Which ones are artisanal friends? This is a reality for those who have too much, for because of their tie to materialistic objects to depict who they are as a person, they start to lose themselves, if there were any person to begin with. This begs the question, do people only cherish the artisanal version of you for what you have and no longer who you are? Like the song says, you begin to hide behind their success, using the achievements and creations of others and your ability to access those things and what makes you truly great. Yet those things are gone, and you're left bare. Who truly are you? The third song, Paper Towels, doesn't tell the story of a specific character or thing, but is more of a message. It describes a mess, hinting at life as this mess, as irreversible, unraveling, and unstoppable. As people, we long for control over situations we simply cannot contain because we long for understanding, most of which being our own living. Being alive is a series of controllable and uncontrollable variables, the latter of which can result in a lack of understanding in which we crave so much. This is conveyed through the lyrics, as they seem all scattered and all over the place to show how messy and scatterish life truly is. So much so, we wish we could just grab a hold of it. At the end of the song, the singer, rather defeatedly, succumbs to this saying, "Guess it's out of my hands." Because that's truly the case here. For the most part, we cannot control exactly what happens to us, because that's just the way the world and life works. As people, we do not control everything, nor can we really wish to, for the only thing we can really hope for is to grasp into the tiniest bit of control we have and hold on to that much. The following song, Oatmeal, is simpler in understanding, yet the message still reigns entirely true. The oatmeal in this song, something the main character eats over and over again for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, communicates both the pain and comfort that comes with the constant routine. In this case, if he branches out to other types of breakfast food, he may not like them as much, so he finds solace within the oatmeal. Even so, there's a constant reminder that time is your master, because that is the constant case. Branching off from the topic of food, oatmeal is meant to symbolize our own experiences, hobbies, and the things that we choose to do with our time and lives, and how we stick to those things. Sure, we enjoy them, like the main character loves his oatmeal, but when it becomes the only thing that you can think about, and the only thing you can do, it begins to suffocate you. Sort of like the main character is drowning in a stock of oatmeal. Doing the same thing, even if it pains you because you want to branch out to other mediums, other things, and ideas, gives life rhythm and maybe harmony, hinting at this being, again, a thing of solace. But, so molded in our own ways, how are we meant to break from the routine? And how are we meant to adapt to change if they've become so permanently stuck in our own ways? So much so that we can't comfort ourselves without them. The song communicates the sadness of relying on one thing, or one person in some cases, to bring you the happiness and joy that you crave, even if this dependency starts to lose its spark, because it's all that you have. The penultimate main song is Coffee, one that became rather popular last year, and that I feel communicates addiction to substances and unhealthy devotion. The man is constantly questioning whether he truly needs his coffee, and even so, continues to keep taking it. He asks, if it swallowed me whole, would I see it? Because in truth, if the coffee were to become the only thing he could care about, the only thing he could create an attachment with, so much so it began to alter who he was, would he notice it doing so? The coffee begins to talk to him, promising it to make him feel whole again, suggesting a furthering of this unhealthy attachment to the substance, as it's the only thing that can make him feel the opposite of empty, which is full. At the end of the song, he manages to separate himself from the coffee, putting up boundaries between himself and the drink. He admits that it feels a lot better, both for himself mentally and physically, to check rather than to reflect, because you can always think about the things you've done, but actually checking and actually trying to understand and fix your issues is what results in good being done. The song differs from the message The song differs from the message of bread because the message can go on to apply to an unhealthy attachment to people, not just substances and hobbies like oatmeal, as sometimes becoming obsessed with a person is a sort of comfort that one needs to feel better. It's a painful sort of coping mechanism, but in turn, it distracts you, and that is what the song is trying to tell the listener. Sure, this thing or person brings you joy, but if it gets to the point where you feel like you can no longer survive without them, they're no longer a complement to you, but the only thing that makes you feel truly alive. This in itself is a problem. Like the coffee wasn't healthy for the protagonist, the thing is the only thing you can think about, something that, in the end, when it leaves, will leave you feeling emptier than ever. The final main song of the musical is Cheese, which, aside from the plethora of cheese puns used that I find rather humorous, the protagonist looking for a specific type of cheese to buy lacks the ability to choose exactly what he wants for himself. Even though this may not seem that big of an issue, it is a reality for many people, as the idea that they should only want the things others want becomes implanted in their head and ends up shaping them all the way down to who they are. Because of this, they become a creation of what solely other people want them to be and will accept them to be. They're not allowed to be their own person anymore because of this, and so much so that, when left to their own decisions, they can't manage to make one. Individuality is one of the things that makes us human, and without it, we become a husk of our own orders and expectations of others, living a life that isn't truly our own, but is simply the culmination of other people's. As I've said before, I really love this album, and in fact, I'm glad it gained so much popularity over the years. It's well written in full, and it manages to convey its lyrics through it manages to convey the idea through the lyrics and chorus, which, aside from the animation, tell exactly what Stauber was trying to say in a poetic way. Without a further understanding of these lyrics, trampled over by the intricacies of the animation or the instrumental, the lyrics, like that of To You, can end up getting lost. But in the end, it's these lyrics that truly go on to shape Stauber's career, because even if his music isn't entirely intelligible, it still says things that can only be communicated through words. The last and final case of lyrics being overlooked, to a more extreme end, has to be the popular internet musical artist Penelope Scott, who I hold very dear to my heart. For lack of a better word, she became a meme of sorts, specifically on the app TikTok, because of people who heavily disliked her music, so much so that they went out of their way to insult literally everything about her. The things were stupid, of course, but I feel that they stemmed from a lack of understanding of what her songs actually meant. As someone who's been listening to her music for around a year now, I found that the way she writes her songs, well, it's beautiful. Most of them are written from her own perspective about things that she feels, so they feel all the more personal. And on top of that, she tells them in a way that communicates exactly what she's going for. And the instrumental is enjoyable as well. Despite the lack of understanding, she was also hated because of the way that she sings her songs. Well, not exactly singing, more so talking over a beat, something not many people enjoy. It takes a specific person to enjoy her music, and many people weren't like that. The case of Penelope Scott wasn't something as simple as a dislike of someone's specific genre, though, for if it was the case, then she wouldn't have been hated to such a degree, but instead because people refused to listen to the things she had to say. One song that I feel this is the most notable in is her song, A Lot of True Crime, a song that depicts and breaks apart just how weird the glorification of serial killers is within internet society. It was one of her most hated songs because of the fact that Penelope wasn't afraid to say what she actually felt about this very, very obscure situation. In society, serial killers like Ted Bundy, the one who she specifically talks about, are held on a pedestal, oddly enough, because of people's abundant interest in them. The romanticization of tragedies, promoted by just bad things happening to people within mediums, have become more normalized, such as the American obsession with horror movies. An idea starts to become implanted in people's heads that this sort of stuff is interesting, and with the rise of true crime podcasts, they can feed into their weird desires. For reference, true crime is a sort of literary genre where the crimes, actions, and upbringings of horrible murder and crime are depicted in detail, just so you know. This is the reason why a lot of true crime is called such, because it's ironic. This is the reason why a lot of true crime is called such, because it is ironic. People intake a lot of true crime because it's what becomes their interest. Due to this, their brains become warped and think that these sort of people are just characters in a silly little story and not real bad people who did horrible things. It's this sort of uplifting that results in the romanticization of these killers, like their characters. It's weird to say in the least, and entirely off-putting, which is something Penelope addresses, because the song, in a way, is mocking these sorts of people. She thinks of them as people who describe true crime as girl talk, like it's some reality show, which I think is genuinely the reality of the situation. Because these people, indulging in all their silly little scary stories, start to think that this is actually normal behavior, being encouraged by those online who have the same interest to think that it is okay to feel this way and it is okay to indulge in this media. One of the lyrics that this song was most renowned for is, "But Ted Bundy was just never that redacted right. He was just sort of charismatic and white, all right, and he was so redacted sure he had the right, but he's ugly, and I'm glad he's dead." The way Penelope says this is not as the person she's mocking, but as herself and her own take on the situation. Because in the end, it is genuinely a system that is what uplifts these serial killers, and it is that in which keeps them thriving, even in death. People fail to notice how damaging this sort of mindset that they have is. So this, what Penelope says, a PSA of sorts, acts as a reminder. Because in the end, your silly little serial killers are real people who killed others, tear families apart, and did horrible things. And just because you think that they're somewhat good looking and the things they did intrigue you does not mean you get to treat them like they're people that deserve to be paid attention to. The reason some serial killers do the things that they do is to get attention, because in most cases, they were never paid attention to in childhood. This, sadly, is one of the excuses used by those who glorify their precious little serial killers. But the thing is, that's not anyone's problem, is it? Just because you lived a horrible life does not communicate the allowance to cause major suffering in others. The families of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, a serial killer that has become rather popular as of late because of the Netflix release of the Dahmer series, are still suffering. Because it doesn't matter how pretty you think he is, or that he thrived off a system and targeted the minorities that the victims were. He thrived off a system that targeted the minorities his victims were a part of, in turn using that to get exactly what he wanted in his sick and twisted fantasies. The popularity of Jeffrey Dahmer is something that's genuinely made me realize, as an outside perspective, how horrible this situation truly is. Because we've made these people seem like they're fictional, and the people who intake true crime like this need to be reminded that these people are horrible people that do not deserve the light of day. Like Penelope said in her song, she's glad that they're dead, because that's what they deserve. The reason they're not alive anymore is because they do not deserve to be alive. So the fact that big companies and corporations like Netflix and thousands of people are trying to draw attention to them is ridiculous and utterly stupid. Not to mention that the true crime industry is just a cheap opportunity to get money from the families of those victims through suffering. Spreading word of these serial killers through documentaries and healthy amounts of media does way more harm than good, because these people are dead, 6 feet in the ground, where they deserve to be. But on the topic of Penelope Scott, this is exactly how she felt, and this is why she wrote this song. But people refused to listen to these lyrics because people chose not to listen. They actively chose to ignore the things she had to say, that being the thing that resulted in such mass cyberbullying, so much so that she needed to take a break. Because of their innate refusal to actually hear what she had to say in her lyrics, the most important part of a lot of true crime, they didn't understand how just important this song is, because it's a wake-up call. A wake-up call to pull yourself out of your delusional fantasies and see that you should not be thinking like this. You shouldn't be so interested in things like this, and you shouldn't think that this sort of thing is okay. And you definitely shouldn't be thinking that the people who committed these heinous crimes deserve the attention that you're actively giving them. These lyrics, the most underrated and hated, I must say, serve such an important role in the song, and are generally something that should have been more deeply paid attention to in order to truly understand what Penelope Scott had to say. To conclude, lyrics within an artist piece, despite being what the song is centered around, are oftentimes ignored in favor of something else, something that, in the case of artists like Penelope Scott, can be detrimental, or in the case of Jack Stauber, something that distracts from the true potential of the piece, or in the case of To You, something that results in a pain-breaking yet essential message failing to be told. Lyrics are what tie a song together, and even if it takes multiple playthroughs to genuinely understand, it is something that will benefit both song and listener in the end. Thank you for listening. All right.